to be back at the Indian Magazine Congress, and I'm emphasizing magazine because we heard what the media planners had to say just before this. Um, the last time I think I was part of the organizers, so when Anant called me, I was really happy that I was invited. And I just feel I wish I had come last night, so I could have sat through all these sessions in the morning. I believe they're wonderful. It's strange. It's been 8 years since I was in the magazine world, and a lot of stuff seems to have changed, and yet there is a lot of stuff which hasn't, good and bad. I was talking to Jan, and I said, you know, it's nice to hear that just do great content and people will buy and spend any $80,000 for one article. I mean, they are great things to hear. But a lot has changed also. The previous panel we were talking about ROAS and return on magazine. That is something that we've been talking about even 8 years ago. Which is why when we are talking about this panel's topic, which is branded content, it's very interesting for me because in 2015, when I left the magazine industry and I came back to JWT and advertising, one of the things which was on the agenda of our global CEO was a new offering called Colloquial, which they had launched or just were beginning to launch in the United States and in certain parts of Europe. And Colloquial actually was a joint venture of JWT and a group called Group SJR, who were, as they refer to themselves, content consultants. They were a bunch of journalists purely from the world of editorial and journalism. And JWT had thought, and WPP had thought, that there is a huge opportunity to actually have a joint venture as an offering for clients to produce branded content. And this is way back in 2015. And I was very, very enthused with it because I was coming from the content background, pure content. And the Colloquial, the way it was positioned to clients was that this is the intersection of advertising and publishing. And ironically, that is pretty much the subject of the discussion today. And I would say one more thing, which will therefore focus the attention away from ROI and stuff that we've been talking about. I'm talking of branded content, which can be carried on our platforms, as in the magazine's platforms, and also third-party platforms. So we are talking about branded content that we produce for clients. So while I was, once again, after the Anant gave me this topic, I was looking at, so therefore, what is the definition of branded content? Because, you know, there is so much content around today. JWT, WPP, Wunderman Thompson, now we produce content, digital content globally for our clients. But what is branded content? So there are lots of definitions. Okay, let me read out one very simple one. And I like this because it's very simple. It says branded content is content that carries a consumer benefit, serves the brand, and is presented in an environment that consumers find authentic. To me, it's very simple, and I just thought that since I have been in advertising for a long period of time, how is it different from advertising? And this is my take on this definition. One of the things is that branded content, to my mind, and when I speak to the other panelists, please, you can have your take on it, is that unlike advertising, it is industry in rather than brand out. So that's my take, and we can discuss it again later. Secondly, it is editorial-led rather than advertising-led, as in advertising copy-led. Third, I think again it's very important, the prime objective of branded content is to start a conversation rather than sell a product or service. And I think these things make it very, very interesting and makes it a bit different from what we do in advertising regularly. And I was discussing with somebody, there is this entire thing about inbound marketing versus outbound marketing. And if you look at inbound marketing, it is content which sucks the advertisers, sucks the consumers in, while outbound marketing is what I do in advertising, which interrupts and pushes advertising out. And from whatever statistics that I was reading up recently, inbound marketing and content marketing is, I think, 60% more effective and 50% cheaper than outbound marketing, or some stuff like this. So to me, there's a huge opportunity. And the other thing about branded content, which I found very interesting was, and as different from advertising, was that branded contents target audiences. They move audiences, they don't try to move consumers. So again, linked to the fact that you're not selling a product, you want to spark a conversation. And people don't want to be sold to as much as they want to know the industry. If you have a fashion product, they don't want to know whether your clothes are better than somebody else. They might want to know what the fashion trends are. So to me, this is was very interesting for me to be discussing this. And in the panel, I'll start with what I missed in the morning, and I'd like all the panelists. I'm here to learn, and we have got a great panel from a global perspective from James. He and I go back some time, and he has seen publishers from all over the world. I have been to some of the international magazine conferences, and as we can see today from the various people we heard, magazines are very different in different parts of the world. Jim talked about research, Kantar, part of the WPP group. I mean, in India, we don't do research. We don't have the numbers to do research. We are so defensive about magazines. It's amazing. And then Norway, and I was discussing with Jan, yes, there are 5 million people. In India also, out of the 4 billion people, 1.4 billion people, we will have more than 5 million people who we can sell to. But those 5 million people are spread all over the country. They are not in a small area like Norway. So I would like to hear from all our panelists, and I'll come to Suklin separately, very interesting. But I'd want to hear, like in Media 24, you have got content marketing as a separate division I saw on your website, and you call it new media. And specifically, and the reason I want to ask is, how big is the revenue opportunity for branded content, which, as I said, is not just on your own platforms, but could be for client websites, could be on third-party platforms, so you could deliver ROI through other digital media platforms, but the content is yours.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much. So we have, as you've mentioned, New Media. New Media is a division within, or a business settled within Media 24 that specializes specifically in content marketing, and they also do a lot of B2B. And yes, from an opportunity perspective, you know, as a growth sector in South Africa, it has grown immensely. I mean, we've also been speaking about branded content for many, many years. But it has taken clients some time to really come to the party in terms of getting involved in the conversation and migrating them into the thinking of this is a different way of presenting your brand, and as you say, starting a conversation about what you are proposing to your clients and what you're trying to sell. Within our magazine business in particular, we've had a branded content studio for about 7 years. And at this point, the growth in terms of advertising revenue that we garner through our branded content studio, about 80% of our advertising income now comes purely from branded content. And so that's been a major shift. And to your point, we've seen now, and we've tried to position it in such a way. We've seen that some of the campaigns that we've done has also been used for third party. So that's sort of some of the success stories that we've recently cracked. And I think that the word that encapsulates it for me, and why I think it's a real game changer, is authenticity. authenticity. There is just, in terms of the way that you can tell the story of what the brand is trying to sell, there is no better way than to position it within that content environment. We have journalists in our branded studios, all ex-newsroom journalists that have sort of, gone over to the dark side, but that are absolutely passionate about creating branded content. It's a very, very exciting space for us.
Wonderful. Since Jim, we just heard Jim talk about brand studio, and I know that the American market is completely diametrically opposite for magazines as it is compared to India. So the need for a brand studio as a new revenue stream might not be as important or as critical as it is maybe for India. But what is your experience? Because it's great to hear Minette. 80% you said is now coming from, even in a developed market where magazines are still pretty strong, 80% comes from branded content. That's fabulous. So
Yes.
it's and while you have talked about it, Jim, where do you see the growth of branded content? And again, I said, not just for your own platforms, but even for third-party platforms.
Before I answer that, I wanted to comment that the way I see the difference is I have a sales force that goes out to Jay Walter and gets an ad, but that ad you produced. In the case of branded studio work, what's happening is the ad is actually, or the message is being created by the people that are deeply entrenched in that particular industry. So in the case of the Chemical Society, we're using chemical editors. We're using the assets of that association, which are massive. The future of that, if you look at Hearst, if you look at National Geo, if you look at Condi, they're all creating brand studio assets. They're all beginning to say, well, why don't we look at our assets and go in directly to clients and present ourselves as the experts in a specific area. And I think that's definitely going to accelerate here, particularly with the demise, I hope, of third-party advertising and so on.
Absolutely. And Minette, you said authentic, you said expert. And I have seen from both sides, from the editorial side when I was in the magazine world, and I've seen it in the advertising side. Advertising creatives know brands very well, but they don't know the chemical industry. And when you're talking of branded content, as I said, it's industry in rather than brand out. So it's interesting that what both of you said, that's what makes it authentic, and that's what makes it an opportunity, which is different from the current opportunities of just space selling of pages of the magazine or even on digital. Okay, now let me come to, before I go to James, let me come to Sucleen. I went to Good Glam site, and the first thing that hits you is content to commerce. It's fabulous, and in our business, whether it was magazines, especially magazines, but even in advertising, in magazine we used to always say content is king. When you say that we are building brands through content, so I am very curious to hear from you. How are you building and how are you using content so successfully to build brands? I know you're new there, but please tell us.
No, Tarun, I'll share a perspective. Having spent now a year and a half, I've got a fairly decent insight. So what you spoke about right now is an authentic community. So fundamentally, what is branded content? It is helping you talk to a community of people who are deeply interested in a topic, delivered in an authentic manner, with informative and educational content, something that is not being pushed like advertising, which is why it is not advertising. So the people that we have within the team who run the Good Media company are all editorial content writers. They are not classic brand content writers, they are editorial content writers. So if you see within the Good Glam group, you have a large revenue monetization that is happening through the brands business, which is about 95% of the revenue generating arm. Having said that, what influences that dollar is actually the media and the creator arm. Within media, if I can just break it into parts, we have three communities that we are fundamentally looking into. You have the lifestyle readers, people who are fundamentally interested in reading about beauty and lifestyle. Men, which is all the content around men and what's happening within the male community. And then mom and baby, which is parenting, which is again a very sharp niche where moms are constantly looking for problem solutions, they're looking for expert advice. Again, it's a deep community which is built on insight. Within that community, when you seamlessly integrate content, not just for your brands, but for the industry, that's when you become authentic. If we were only hard selling our business, beyond a point, there would be no takers. People would like to see you as an industry or a segment expert, not necessarily a brand expert. So when we are trying to build our business, we are leveraging on our own platforms, but equally trying to just harness communities. And that's really the endeavor.
Right. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, this is exactly what we would be talking about monetizing communities, man. This is literally what they're doing. So I'll ask you later as to can we, as in the magazine industry, collaborate with you? We have got all the expertise that you require, just outsource, and this is branded content. And whether it's you or the other online platforms, I mean, this is literally using content to build brands and to sell. And it's amazing. I saw some of the brands that you are selling. And again, it's a different sell, but this is a model that is obviously very successful. Just today, I read in the Mint, you're raising another 400 crores or so. I said, what, we called you on the right day. But again, that's what I'm saying. It's amazing when Anand said that he is going to get Sucleen in the panel. I said, I've seen Sucleen as a regular client with Reckitt and L'Oreal too, and Unilever before that. But that is as a CMO, where you look at magazines, and I believe we could still sell some very interesting programs for magazines. But here, this is literally using content to sell. James, you have seen magazines from all over the world. You have heard Minette and Jim, again, developed markets, especially United States. Even the UK, where you are based, even that is a very developed market. And I believe I actually had a dinner with Peter Phippen a few months ago. And I said, so how is the magazine market after the pandemic? I mean, it took him a few minutes to even understand what I was asking. He said the same, it's okay. I mean, we are still doing okay. So you tell us your perspective about branded content and the opportunity, especially for India, where revenue streams are, we need more revenue streams.
Yeah, I mean, it's not and it's nice to be on this panel, by the way, and nice to see you again, Taryn. We did meet many, many years ago, 15 years ago, when we were both 20 years old, of course. So it's great to be back here with you. It's a global phenomenon, and it's interesting that it's not a new phenomenon. Branded content has been around for, I would say, 25 years, certainly all the time I've been in the industry, and Jim's nodding, probably even longer than that. We used to call them advertorials. People would come and do an advertorial, and that was a way of putting branded content in the magazine, and we spent a lot of time making sure that, we had this great rule at the BBC, never let the reader mistake something that is advertising for editorial, and that was a really good way to distinguish branded content from the rest of the editorial content in the magazine. So it's not a new phenomenon. I think what is changing is brands, first of all, brands that have been in and out of the content for a long time, and they commit to it and then they pull back. And think about Marriott Hotels, for example, who built newsrooms around the world and a big content strategy and then just gave up because it didn't work. Now I think brands are starting to be a lot more consistent in their approach to content and brand and therefore branded content. They recognize exactly the point that you made, that they are brands and they understand themselves. They don't understand the verticals necessarily that they're operating in. And then on the publisher side, we're certainly seeing in most markets around the world that publishers are responding by building these studios, putting more consistency, as Minette's described, into the way that they're able to service those client needs so that they're not just doing ad hoc pieces of advertorial work. They're treating it like a full content studio, able to operate across all the platforms and all the mediums that they use in their core business and giving that expertise to the brand. So that's certainly happening everywhere. There's some good pockets of success. One of the best ones that we had recently is Meredith have a very good content studio called The Foundry, where they've really leveraged the power that they have of their content creation teams and their audience understanding in women's lifestyle to create some fantastic branded content spaces. But certainly for any publisher anywhere, this is a critical part of their advertising strategy, and it sits with equal measure alongside their programmatic strategy, their direct sales strategy. They have to have a content studio, not only because it's an opportunity, but because the brands are asking for it.
Okay, so I mean, it's pretty clearly a revenue stream, and again, I keep repeating, and especially because the panel before us, we had such a discussion about magazines are small and ROI. So therefore, I'm saying, especially in India, the opportunity is not just to create content only for your own platforms, but actually even for third-party platforms. My question, therefore, the next one from Minette and Jim, because they are actually running studios and you have got your new media. What constitutes a good team? And Suklin, you can contribute also. You mentioned you have journalists. What is a good team to it's new media? Therefore, it's a lot of digital. We discussed earlier about young people wanting to watch and listen. So we are talking about content, which is a podcast. It's a video. We talked about, and it happened with us when we published Top Gear magazine, and our editors and the editorial team was very good at writing. Long form writing is something that we're very good at, even taking photographs. And once I just mentioned to them that, why can't, it's the same camera, because today cameras have the video option, why can't you take videos? But you're right, young people watch, and shareability and digital platforms and the mobile phones, difficult to read long copy. So what constitutes an ideal team? And the reason I'm asking is that, even in advertising we struggle because the world is changing to digital. A lot of our creative people are still stuck in the broadcast television 30-second TVC, and I was discussing with Jan earlier, because TV is a horizontal landscape model, even to graduate from a landscape model in terms of visualization to a mobile phone horizontal model is a challenge for a lot of creative people. So in new media, and when you're talking about branded content, what constitutes an ideal team?
If I start with new media, they were traditionally set up really just focusing on writers and photographers, basically studio set up. But they've actually, in the last 3 years, they acquired a tech development business so that they can actually service their clients to build bespoke digital platforms. So that's how far they've taken their team in terms of capability. So that's sort of, really next level, and, I think that was a good move in terms of really finding a clever way to be a full house agency for client, so they can really do everything on any platform. Our own magazine studio doesn't necessarily function on that level of sophistication in terms of development. It just becomes too expensive, obviously, and quite prohibitive in terms of your cost of sale. But what we've done is we've bought software packages off the shelf, which is much more of a plug and play. That one of those is Shorthand. So we use that quite successfully in terms of building. It's template driven, but we can build, as quick as in a day. For some, if that's what you want, not that that's what we advise, of course. We talk the client off the ledge, but within a day you can create a content hub digitally that's both mobile as well as web agnostic, meaning it lives on both, and so that makes us quite agile, and it is not cost prohibitive, so it's very affordable. And along with that, we've built in capabilities within our business, because we have the luxury, fortunately, of having a TV business within our company. So that has given us access to studios and TV production, so that helps us a lot with creating visual as well as audio at quite an affordable rate, because we can produce it in-house. So having those capabilities and not having to outsource all of that to other third parties in order to create a finished product means that we can really go create a full service package in terms of branded content, all within our own business. And although I might pay our TV business, right, to produce a piece of content for me because I'm delivering that for a client, it is an in-house service, right? So we, so from a efficiency and from a utilizing scale, that really makes sense in terms of driving the bottom line.
I think from a sales perspective, which is what I know about, kind of to repeat what I said before, it's finding someone that knows how to keep their mouth shut and to listen carefully to the client and or agency. That's the first thing. And the second is to manage the process. And the way that I would recommend and what we look for when we do these things is actually an account executive out of an agency, because that's exactly what they're taught to do. They're intermediates between the editorial department, the client, which will have conflict with the journalistic side, mediators. So it's my experience with this has been it's a long process. You have to be really patient. And an account executive out of an agency or a management supervisor or something is a terrific set of skills for this.
Well, that was the colloquial theory, that you actually marry advertising and journalism and produce branded content, and therefore you get capabilities from both sides. And Suklin, you mentioned your experience, and you said you have got journalists who are contributing this content on your site.
No, so there are two kinds of people. One are the kind of people who are subject matter experts. So if you're writing on a mom and baby portal, you do need to have subject matter experts who can give authentic advice. And then for young publication sites, like today we have two media publishing content portals that we own. One is PopXO and the other one is Scoop. Fundamentally very young TG. So the sort of writers you want for that content are people who can mirror the audience. Otherwise, chances are you are not going to keep pace with who your audience is. Your audience is a really young person. He's 18-year-old, 20-year-old. He's on the go. And you do need people who can reflect the pulse of that audience. So those are the two sets that we have in-house. It's a completely in-house team. And then you, of course, collaborate with many partners as you go along. But fundamentally, this core strength has to be built internally.
James, you mentioned advertorial, and I think we have come a long way from advertorials, and it just reminded me of our very interesting joint venture that I headed. One was the ethics, Taliban-like ethics of the BBC, and the not-so-Taliban-like ethics of the Times of India. So that's another story. But I think we have the editorials, and even we used to have brand solutions then. But I think today we are talking about, and I am actually kind of bowled over by what Minette said, of 80% of revenues coming there, and again from Suklin, which are building brands. So in terms of your perspective, you have seen, again, as I said, publishers from all over the world.
Yeah.
What is happening, and what kind of new skills are people hiring to produce this content?
Yeah, it's an altogether different level of sophistication from what it was all those years ago. And by the way, you used to have to do a very good job of walking the line between the Taliban and the non-Taliban, if that's the right way to describe it, as did I sometimes. I think it's the same disciplines that you have in your publishing business, your content creation business overall. I don't think anymore that you can separate the two and say, look, there's a bunch of skills in video and audio or whatever it might be that we use in our core business that we're not going to let you have. They want access, brands quite rightly want access to the same skill set that is being developed in your core publishing business, because that's why they've come to you. They're looking to you as a publisher, as an expert in creating quality content, and they want some of that. And this is the nice competitive, that's why they come to us in the first place, right? That's the nice competitive tension. The reality is that brands know they can't do that very well, because that's not what they do. Fair enough. They come to us because we're the experts. The flip side of that is we have to give them the full expertise, not the light version. And I think that's the change that's happened in the last few years, is that we are now much more aware as an industry that our goals and our needs are aligned with what those brands want. And it's a much healthier relationship, to the extent that there are even, in my experience, there are some businesses that have sprung up where content creators have created their own studios around particular verticals just to harness that creative content, and they almost don't need the publishing business at all. One of our ex-colleagues on Top Gear now has a very successful content agency in the UK producing content for automotive, and he's the content guy for McLaren cars. Another one that we would have come across, a guy called Simon Weir, created the Global Cycling Network, which was just sold to Discovery for £40 million or whatever it was. That was very, very tight focus on a single niche, but taking that combination of quality expert journalism, multi-platform storytelling, and bringing that together with brands. And I think it's a magic combination, and people are really starting to realize that now.
Okay, so since you mentioned that branded content has been around for a long time, I also have a little bit of a story of the Good Food magazine while we could still publish it. And we had gone down to Bangalore, and our Bangalore head wanted us to meet up with some clients. And Tata Tetley agreed to meet up with me. And I was very surprised because Tata Tetley is a mass brand of tea. What would they want a niche magazine like Good Food, and why would they be interested? But the guy agreed to meet me because he was ex-Unilever, Vikram Grover. And he said, oh, I know you, and of course, and we have met. So he agreed to meet us. And I said, okay, it's just a courtesy. So I thought we'll have a nice cup of Tata Tetley tea and come away. But we came away with a huge business which we didn't even know existed. They wanted us to make 50 videos on tea, how to brew various different types of tea, and he called his head of PR, not marketing, but head of PR, because this was part of the PR budget, and they had been trying, and they had tried various people to commission for their own website. Third party, this is not, they are not riding on the Good Food magazine platform. For third party, they could not do it. And because our editor was also with us, I mean, it was nothing for us because as I was talking to Srini, and which is one of the reasons that I was also interested in this branded content piece, we actually came up with our own mission statement when I was with Worldwide Media as to what business are we in, and this is the time when the iPad had been launched, and we said we have to be completely agnostic to what medium carries our content, so we don't have to be stuck with the printed medium. So what we came up with for what the business we are in is branded content for communities. So, and again, that was branded content because content is available at the touch of a button, but branded makes it from Lonely Planet or Top Gear or Good Food, and communities is the topic. We serve communities, but also equally importantly, we also connect the industry community to the consuming community. So we connect our contact with the fashion industry is as strong as it is with the consumers of fashion. So similarly with food, why could we organize a Good Food show very quickly is because thanks to the magazine, we knew all the celebrity chefs, we knew the organic producers who didn't have even money to advertise, or even if it's Bollywood with Filmfare, we know the industry as a community, and we know the fans as a community. So we put them all together. So to your point that it has been around for a long time, yes, it has been around.
Tara, in speaking, you reminded me of one other development that's happened, I think, recently as well. Before, it used to be the case that publishers got quite protective about producing that branded content, and the understanding was you were producing it to go in your own magazine or on your own website. I think what's changed now is that publishers are very comfortable with just being the content provider, and you can use that on any platform, on any brand you like. And that I would say is a big change.
To me, especially in India, because I mean, Srini was struggling to get onto the front foot in the previous discussion. But you know, if you're talking about third party, well, then you get your ROIs, man. We are talking about producing great expert content. I mean, we are the content. I mean, that's the subject of our. We can have a separate discussion, and I've got my points of view also. But this branded content, and if it can be 80% here, if it can be 20%, it's opening up a new revenue stream. So it's to my mind, it's hugely important. So to me, I think we still have 10 minutes, but I believe the bar is open and the throats are dry. So in the end, I mean, if I can ask everyone, if you were to give a piece of advice to the audience here on specifically branded content, and that's something it's very interesting. Here you've got content is king and the queen, so who's actually using content to and literally monetizing communities. So any advice that you can give them, please?
Just what I said earlier, it's a critical part of your advertising and commercial strategy. If you don't have a branded content studio, you're leaving money on the table.
No, I completely agree, and that's really not the strength for companies that advertise, because that doesn't come naturally to them. I think for me, the second one which really stands out is, I think Apple taught the industry the power of ecosystems. And I think if we were to reapply that learning to any industry, I think one does need to think ecosystem. What can you give for free? Where can you find the partnership? How do you leverage scale to actually make yourself more meaningful in the industry is something to think about.
We did some research a couple of years ago in terms of how our audience experiences the branded content and how they, engage with it. And it was absolutely fascinating what came back. And I wish this was the truth, but they view it as that every single piece that appears was chosen specifically for them by the editor. They think it was curated for them. And for me, wow, that just spells opportunity, because if that is how the audience is experiencing it, then you're absolutely on the right track. So for me, it's, just do it as soon as you can.
Oh, you're already doing it.
I think my advice on this is if you're going to become, in essence, an advertising agency, you need to understand that agencies start campaigns and they also have a life, and that life ends. And so if that's true and you're going to chase branded studio business, you need, the day you get that piece of business is the best day of your life and also the worst day of your life, because you're going to lose it over time. So you need to go out and replace it immediately and find other candidates for it.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. All I can say is that when I started reading about branded content, because colloquial somehow or the other lost its way globally, and we never launched it in India, it was pretty much that branded content is the death knell of advertising. So, I'm sorry, but we are pushing branded content at the cost of advertising, and a large part of the reason is that the trust in advertising, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned about news and other media in terms of trust, but even advertising in terms of trust is sliding down. Branded content where you are giving consumers content which is of use to them is something that they're happy with. And since the president is Srini and there was talk about vernacular, and he had to point out that he runs a very successful vernacular magazine, I can tell you in the advertising industry, we struggle with vernacular. So to my mind, in India, with all these languages, vernacular content, and I don't know about Good Clam, but vernacular content, vernacular branded content is actually even a bigger opportunity than English, to my mind. So, because I'm saying it from the advertising perspective, we can do clever stuff in English, but we struggle in vernacular. So to me, hopefully, after hearing all the panelists and their experience, hopefully we are ending on a bit of a positive note, that we are opening up a reasonably good new revenue stream, and which is always useful, because I don't know how much branded content we're already doing, but if the base is low, Well, the growth percentage is going to be certainly pretty good. So thank you for all the panelists. Thank you for inviting me. I mean, I really enjoyed myself, and I will catch some of the presentations that I missed online. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tarun. Love your passion on the topic, though.
Well, I was told that the magazine business is the passion business. So